Cool. And then I'm Linda. I'm focused on growing the developer ecosystem at Farcaster. Joined a month ago. Previously was working on Bountycaster, also kind of working on the side, which is bounties on top of Farcaster. And then prior to that was in VC for a while and also was at Coinbase. I think a lot of people here probably know what frames are. But for those not aware, they are mini apps inside Farcaster social feed. We are rebranding to Mini Apps, which I'm really excited by, just because it makes it more clear to people who are used to Telegram and World. They support on-chain transactions. What's really cool is you can easily convert existing web apps to frames. And so that should be a lower lift than having to build an entirely new mobile app from scratch. And then the use cases vary widely from games to NFT minting, prediction markets, DeFi, personality tests, and many more. Basically, if you can build an app for something, you can build a Frames version of that in the feed. So why build a frame? It's a great way to get your first 1,000 fans. Interactions are all from within the feed, so you're not pushing users somewhere else where they might drop off. What's also really cool is maybe if you've used Warpcast or another client, you can see there's frames being shared constantly, and oftentimes it's due to a frame having a share button. And so, for example, like I'm playing the game Farcaster every day, which is like GeoGuessr, but in a frame. And every time I finish that guess of the geographic location, I hit share, and that goes into my feed, and others are able to see the game from within there. What's also really unique is you can connect with Warpcast Wallet for mobile on-chain transactions to monetize. Frames also supports other wallets, but what's really unique is we've seen that Warpcast Wallet just allows for much more seamless transactions. And then one really underrated benefit is you have native in-app notifications. So you actually can see the notifications from the frame that you've added, and that actually will help retain users. So very high level, why build a frame? I guess, Samuel or Rish, anything you wanted to add there?
One thing on the
I just want.
notifications. Yeah, sure, Rish, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, one thing on the notifications is most people in crypto always say like, oh, we just want to build a PWA because we can then send notifications. I have grown to hate PWAs out of the fullest of my heart for the one reason that as a developer, you don't get notifications to work reliably because the literal operating system of the phone will work against you because they don't want you to have a web page that just runs continuously in the background for security reasons. And then as a developer, you have to work around that. If the user doesn't come back regularly, you lose the option to send them a notification, which is why you wanted that in the first place. With a frame, you get their FID, means even if they do not add your frame, you can send them a direct cast. Programmatically, you can ping them in the feed, and if they add your frame, you can now send them push notifications. So to me, that's way more powerful than building a PWA. And if you can, you just build a full-on mobile app, and then you have all mobile push notifications anyway, right? Like that to me is the spectrum where like frames is the first one to really give you retention in that sense, that a PWA can't, and then full-on mobile app, obviously, if it's on the home feed, you're stronger.
Cool.
The one other thing I'll add is like, I think the first line is actually the most important line here, which is if you're building something new, distribution is the hardest problem to solve whenever you're starting out. And just getting to go out to thousands of people on your first day of launch where they see you on their home feed is by far the easiest way to engage with your users. And not only will people come and engage with your app, they'll do it in a way where you know who they are and you can reach back out to them. And that is what kickstarts any major product cycle where you can like build something and then go talk to your users. And it's like by far the most underrated and underutilized part of this. So frames are definitely the right way to start for that cycle.
Yeah.
The being able to know who your user are, you can also look up those FIDs on the feed again and run something like just Neynar data against them, see their wallets, track the on-chain data, use something like MBD's APIs to just literally look up what kind of categories are they into, get some AI analysis on it. So you actually now have a full-on picture on your user, like Rich said.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, when we were building Bountycaster, we found that Farcaster was the best community to get feedback. And so people are very responsive, willing to try out your product. And even if it's not in a great state, they're always willing to give feedback. So we were able to get our first few thousand users for Farcaster. And so yeah, +1, highly recommend. So then our next is we're going to have Rish and Samuel go into how do you actually build a frame. Do you want to share your
The Neynar template.
yeah, maybe
Sure,
share your screen so that if you want to walk through anything.
I think this is all right. I can share my screen. I just don't have the right side pulled up. 1 sec. There's a couple ways to get started building a frame. Warpcast has Frames v2 demo repo. There's more coming on that repo soon, which I think Tony will announce either today or next week. That you can turn into a frame. There's a web app to turn into a frame tool, which is also linked in that demo repo. We already posted the slides in the chat, but maybe somebody wants to post again so that the people who joined in can also click the links. And then at Neynar, we built this tool, which I personally think is the easiest way to create a frame, where anywhere you are on your computer, you can open a terminal and just type in npx Neynar create Farcaster Mini App. Mini App being the new brand name for frames as Warpcast is changing it. It will also work if you do create Farcaster frame, but Mini App is where we just want people to start using the new name. And it's an open source package. You can go explore the code base yourself, and it'll download and start setting up the frame for you. It'll go through a bunch of questions. I put together a video earlier. Maybe I can bring that up somewhere, where it shows going through the full flow in under a minute. And I'll throw that in here as well somewhere. Where is it? This one. Here's this video, and you can go through this video if you want, and it kind of just shows you what this looks like. And essentially what it does is that it takes you through a series of questions, does all the auth for you. So it'll sign the manifest and create a manifest file, so you don't have to do the signature, don't have to connect to your phone and have your recovery phrase on your phone to go generate the signature and so on. It'll create the manifest, it'll set up notifications, analytics, everything. And in under a second, you'll have a frame that you can then go test on the local debugger. It'll set up the tunnel, and you'll have a local tunnel URL. Once you start doing this, then you can get into the next steps of actually adding your notifications, where again, you can set up your own notification server. There's a couple links in the slides, or you can use a managed notification server, which we also provide. The package, by the way, that I'm referencing comes with a built-in Neynar API key. So if you don't have a subscription, don't worry about it. You can just keep going through. And then you can set up a managed notification server on the Neynar side, where it'll allow you to both send notifications. So we have this tool, presumably I'm logged in somewhere. So we have this inside our dev portal where you can come in on apps, build an app. There's a V2 frame inside every app. And every app by default gets a frame notification URL. And you can just plug this into your frames manifest. If you use our package, it'll plug it in for you, so you don't have to do anything. And once this is plugged in, you can actually come in and send notifications to your users from within the dev portal without having to write any code. So if people are using your app and you want to send a midweek or end of week notification, you can just come in, fill out the notification title, body, etc., and then broadcast it out from here. And that also helps keeping the user funnel going much more easily without having to like run everything from scratch. Finally, to debug your frames, this is the Warpcast debugger tool. Wait, did I land on the right thing? Here. Oh, it's it got changed live. I think Tony's getting ready for his announcement probably. But I guess everybody here is looking at this maybe before it's been announced. So frames are now mini apps, like I was saying. You go into this mini app thing and you can go and preview how the frame looks. And you just have to put in your frame URL here. And if you're using the package, it'll set you up with a frame URL that you can come and put in here immediately. And the rest of these here are more docs where you can go in and dive into the specification, other docs to get data, so on and so forth. So let me pause there. Questions, or Samuel, if you want to add anything.
No, first if there's questions, feel free to add them. One thing I want to emphasize is the web apps. So what the Neynar create repo does is it sets you up with a web app. So yes, there's like Neynar baked in, and you don't have to set up Neynar in your web app. But if you're familiar with web apps, you can just literally go and build a web app. It's like if you're used to building web apps in .NET or Java, or God forbid Java, but I had my fair share of hurdles with Java. I don't like it, but like any kind of framework, whatever you want to use, you're now getting into web app building. That also means mobile apps, right? So if you have a mobile app, and say like with something like React Native, Expo, you now get a web app or some web pages with that. You can just add the metadata, like in the tool that Rish showed, or just by following one of the guides. The link on like bring your own web app has a dTech guide with like literally just 2 steps. It's literally 2 steps. Takes 5 minutes if you already know your way around the app. And that way you just set up and now it works in a frame. So the one mental thing to keep in mind is whether it's called mini app, frame, however it's called, it's a web app under the hood, and you can bring that straight to where your user is at, what Linda talked about in the beginning, right? Like this is the main thing to keep in mind. You're building a web app, so if you're asking yourself what does work in a frame, well, anything that works in a web app, most likely, right? So if you want to build something multiplayer, you want to build a game, you want to build something with a game engine, as long as it renders in the web, you're fine. So that's like the one thing to keep in mind that I really want to emphasize, because people always come to me and they're like, oh, can we do this in a frame? I'm like, well, you built a web page for it, so yes. And then they're like, oh, can you just like turn our app into a frame? I'm like, well, sure, we can do that if you don't want to do all the debugging yourself, but hey, it's like 5 minutes. So if you have an engineering team, like, sure, we'd love to work with you, but hey, here's our docs, right? So that's the thing. It's not that complicated. If you use any of the AI generated tools, we'll get to that a little bit later, you can just generate a web app, add the frames, and you're good to go. So that also works for those not into code.
Do one of you want to take over slide sharing, or should I keep going?
Which should definitely be one of you two.
Okay, Sam, you want to take over these sections?
Oh yeah, do you want to keep that tab open that way? It's fine.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, basically the frame stack, I'm once again asking you to build a web app. It's like if you're asking yourself, well, what contributes to a frame? Like, what's the frame stack? What technologies are used? It's a web app store. So I listed a bunch of things there specifically to trigger some people. There's no Next.js there. If you use Next.js, I instantly know where your bugs are because I've seen too many. But there's a bunch of things. You can just literally use pure HTML. The dTech turn your website into a web app, like in a frame guide, actually just has a pure HTML sample. So if you do not want to use any kind of JavaScript, that also works. If you just literally any way you want to build a web app, that works. Then if you use Neynar, you don't even have to manage notifications, as Rish has shown previously, but if you want to do it yourself or you have a more complex app and you need some kind of data layer, it's a web app. So any kind of technology, data layer, or whatever you've used before works, like a key value store, probably a Redis, a database. One important thing to keep note of is most of Farcaster runs on Postgres, meaning if you pick a database that is not Postgres, most likely people haven't used it or like aren't using it in the Farcaster ecosystem. So you may run into some things that other people haven't seen. So I personally would just say, like, if you're picking a database and you don't know why you're not picking Postgres, that's the safe option. But if you're picking a database, you already kind of know why you need one. Most apps typically in the end need one. So keep that in mind. SQLite works also well, but depends. Also, AI is getting really good at front-end. AI is literally my favorite front-end engineer right now. So you can just use it to take the Neynar sample, ask it, hey, here's pictures. Like a really cool trick is to literally go around some like web pages and ask it, hey, like this web page looks really cool. Can you just rebuild this for me? And it will literally do it. But go iterative, go like step by step. And if you think the AI becomes dumb, just start a new chat. It just resets, refreshes its mind, and then you can go again. So that's like how to think about the frame stack. The more interesting thing is the next slide, which is literally data models. There's been one question on the feeder, like how do you actually model a frame? How do you go from data to a frame? And that to me is the most interesting because you have the FID, which is a unique identifier. Some people try to use usernames, but the username can change. You don't know if I'm using my Farcaster name, my ENS, or if I'm even changing my username. The FID will stay unique for each account. So you can use that as kind of your like FID layer. We will get into some user models and auth later, but data flows to me are the most important. Like, when you're thinking, do I need a database? Well, that question comes from what data do you have? What does the application do? What do you want to do in the app? Just like literally figuring out what you want to do first is really helpful, because then you do less changes later. You can also just code away at it and then you'll see and then you'll figure it out. Maybe I is able to help you, but I just generally like figuring it out first and then going through. How do you get Farcaster data is also another question. People always say like, oh, can I show you Farcaster user data? Well, you can use an API like Neynar and just get that right in there, but you have to figure out, okay, what are the Neynar docs? How can I read them? Then get that into the frame. Is there any kind of data that I want to cache? Because then maybe it's available faster. Can I just hit Neynar every single time? How do I handle that API key? I probably don't want it in my front end so that every user sees it, right? Like, that's maybe something you want to be aware of, and the combination of social and financial data is great. So if you use the blockchain, you get financial data. If you use Farcaster, you get social data. If you combine that, you all of a sudden have a way better picture of the person that you're now modeling, and you can personalize to. So that's something to keep in mind generally. Rish, if you want to add anything on the data side, that's just a brief overview.
Yeah, no, I think everything makes sense. I +1 not storing keys on the front end. We actually have specific documentation and components that will stop you from storing keys on the front end. So if you're ending up using Neynar for this, then in some ways you'll get the right warnings and systems to make it easier.
Yeah, please do not store keys on the front end. If you do, we're happy to fix your code. Anyways, we can move on to the next slide, I think. If there's no questions, let me check the chat. Nope. Okay. Yeah, testing frames. It's one question that always comes up. Literally, the Builder's Garden team, shout out Limoni and team, have built a really great starter template as well, where they use a utility called Eruda that now on mobile you also see browser logs. That's really helpful in, like, if you literally take out your mobile device and you try to debug, you all of a sudden don't get any logs anymore in the frame embed. It's like, well, I have the frame open, I'm testing, why doesn't this work? Well, you can use that. Generally though, the Neynar template has a tunnel for you. That's what Rish was talking about, because why? You may want to post your link into the load debugger. The screenshot is of the old tool, so you've witnessed a life change in Webcast developer tooling, but the Morpho frame is right in there, and that link is currently the production domain. If you want to test, you don't want to use that potentially, so you just want to use, say, like your local deployment that you're like actively hacking on, and then if you use the Neynar template, that already gives you a URL. Otherwise, ngrok has been fine for most people. We internally use Cloudflare. Yeah, as Dylan mentions, Coinbase has its own like mini kit that you can also use. That's just generally. There's also some docs on how to test. I've written down like most of that information on how we approach testing in the dTech docs. There's a local debugger as well. So like if you don't mind just debugging locally, or you don't have internet connection, you're in a train in Europe, or you're on a flight, or you're just generally somewhere, then yeah, there's also the Flames.js debugger, which has been working great for people. So that's generally how we debug. And then one thing to keep in mind, best practices, is always check that you call the SDK actions.ready. Like SDK.actions.ready. Literally 80% of debugging for us has been just literally telling people to call the ready function. First, you need to get the embed going so that, for example, here the Mofo logo shows up, then call the ready function, because otherwise you will just see the web page loading forever, and you don't want that, right?
Cioè che ci sta alla fine c'era un problema leggermente che non si deve risolverlo a monte, però a volte non è
Well, going on with testing, you may want to share preview deployments, right? Preview meaning like maybe you don't test in production, maybe you do. There's GitHub integrations for most hosters. A lot of frames I see are hosted on Vercel. Vercel has full-on integration for GitHub, so if you just post to your non-production branch, it will just generate a URL for you. You can send it around to your team, to people that you want to test it, and they can then go into the developer tools and just test it, or even post it on the feed or something. And Neynar also, and this is crucial, has multiple apps. Like when Rish showed his like developer dashboard, which Rish, if you want to show the app overview quickly, there you have multiple apps. So you see the little API key there, where he could press copy. If you have, say, like a team of devs that you need to share an API key with for debugging, or you use a contractor or like a development boutique like us, you don't want to give us our production API key. Because for safety reasons, if we just do something with that API key, maybe you just want to roll it after development is done and you're like, hey, no, those people can't use my API key anymore. And then it's not properly separated and you have test and production, right? So that's really cool. That's on the security side. That's on building full-on apps. There's also the option to just, if you want to have the frame manifest like hard-coded, that works. Some people are like, well, I can't get my manifest to load in like localhost or debugging. Well, Versal has a Versal_URL environment variable that you can use if you're in Versal. Otherwise, I just generally set like a frame URL or something, just like the app URL. If you have that in an environment variable, like the domain you're deployed to, then you can just write the same code and configure the URL to always be what you want it. It's kind of like a base URL if you're dealing with APIs. You can write a little helper. I think Neynar also does that for you, Rish, if I'm not mistaken, in the template. Most templates just use that, so there may be some like config.ts or host URL function somewhere.
Yeah, we do that for you already, and the new tool Warpcast is going to launch. It uses Neynar underneath as well, so if you use that, that will also do that for you. It'll just ask you a question about, hey, do you want to sign your manifest? And if it does, it'll install everything in the right places. And it stores everything on local, marks things with .git ignore, so you don't mistakenly upload it to Git and leak your seed phrase or whatever. So all of that should already be taken care of.
Yeah, there's one thing with seed phrases. You don't have to generally generate the manifest through that app if you don't feel comfortable with that. But we'll get to that a little. I think I have a slide on that as well. Yeah. Are there any questions on previewing frames while we're at it? I don't think so. No, nothing in chat. Cool. Yeah, manifests. As we just said, Neynar generates that for you. There's this new Webcast developers tool, so there's a screenshot of the new one, and where you can also just type it in and generate it for you. If you do that on mobile, you also just can generate the signature that you need your own. The manifest is important. When we talk manifest, we mean the .wellknown/farcaster.json. If you go through the docs, you'll realize what that actually is. The dTech guide just also explains it, and it's also in the official docs. What that is needed for is, Webcast says, oh, I want to know who you are if you want to send push notifications to my users. Before you get into a ranking, we need to know who's the frame from, because otherwise Webcast can't be like, hey, we're paying you, right? In developer rewards or ranking you in that feed. So it's a little more information that you get. If you don't care about sending notifications or being in a leaderboard or people saving your frame for later, you could just use the FC frame meta tag and that will just work. That it won't say built by like Samuel, Rish, Neynar, Builder's Garden, or whatever. It will just say, hey, here's the domain, and it just opens as a frame, right? If you do not feel comfortable importing your seed phrase on your desktop and that sign for you, then you can just do that on the mobile app, which is also in the dTech docs. It's explained there. I think, not sure about the Webcast docs, like the docs.farcaster.xyz, probably also in there. Any tips on updating frame icons, splash images the correct way? Yeah, if you want to see the metadata changes reflected, we'll talk about caching in just a bit. So we'll probably get to that there. Otherwise, how you would change it is you just adjust the manifest, right? So that little JSON builder, if you're using that tool, or you just go into your code, you change the URL there, and you're good to go. Or you just change the image that's served at that URL. And we'll get into caching in a second, so that should clarify that.
One other thing to add here is that although the manifest is not required, it is actually pretty important also if you want your frames to be opened in other apps. So for example, if you want the base wallet to render your frame, they're more likely to prioritize showing frames that have a manifest versus don't have a manifest, simply by virtue of like figuring out who made it or how good the developer is behind it. And the same things about ranking apply. So it's not just Warpcast, but across the ecosystem. Manifests will improve how your frames are perceived versus not. So something to keep in mind if you're looking to skip that.
Yep. Generally, I would advise on adding a manifest, though it just also works without, technically. Nice. Yeah, we'll get to the caching in a little bit, but one thing about frame or not a frame. How can you make sure that your app works within a frame and without a frame? So if you do wallet connections and any kind of these on-chain actions, there's a frame WACME connector. Most likely you're going to be in TypeScript. If you're not, you can figure that out. You can just inject the current provider. So how does that look like? How can I envision that? Well, if you're rendered in the frame, what Webcast does for you, and any kind of Farcaster client also does this, is they just instantly put a wallet in there. It's like if you open a web page and then you have to click your browser extension, you have to go in there, or on mobile, you push out to another app, you go back. You don't need that anymore because the user is already connected once, and we will just use that connection. And if there's like a wallet, say like a Webcast wallet or Coinbase wallet, they will just literally have a wallet in there. They don't even need to provide that connection, but you as a dev, you don't care about this. If you're not inside of that frame, then you won't have that connection. So you should handle the case where there is currently no wallet connected to your app, unless you're 100% sure that you're always within a frame. So I like the little red line on the left image. It says, please open this app as a frame within Webcast. How did I make sure that I can actually notice this as a developer? Well, I'm checking whether or not I currently have the Farcaster SDK.context object. If you just use the SDK and then you type in SDK dot, you will see this like context object. And if that is available, then the SDK is loaded. If it's not, it isn't. So that actually provides you with a way to check, okay, am I on a web app, am I on a frame? And then you can just render the different parts of your logic or app based on that. You also don't have the Farcaster data on a web app, and if you need it, you would then prompt somebody to sign in with Farcaster, right? Using like Farcaster Connect or current auth kit. And then you're in, and then you get the same data back. But that's something to keep in mind, especially also like if you're data modeling. That's potentially also something where you have a shared data model of like the FID, and the way you get it is just either directly from the frame or from the literal like web page. You just ask somebody to sign in again. We'll get to auth as well. So auth and caching we'll get to, but that's generally how you can differentiate between frame and non-frame. Yeah, auth. There's a data model all the way at the bottom. The Farville screen literally shows you like, oh yeah, you can request somebody to sign in. On mobile, that will just push up the signing, and you just press a button. On desktop, that will show you your phone, because that's where your like custody address key is, and that's currently used for signing. But one thing about auth is you should never take auth lightly. If you have any kind of questions about auth, please like read the docs 3 times, ask somebody, ask for help, like literally double check, triple check your authentication. Because if your authentication breaks, you will have side effects that users do not expect. And you may even have some security things where you just show some funds to some people if you're building a wallet or a banking app. It's probably not good to just fiddle around with auth unless you know what you're doing or you like properly figure it out. So please ask if there's any questions on it. Generally though, like for most frames, you don't need auth. Like there's a lot of frames currently being built where you just have wallet interactions and then you don't need any authentication because you just plug into the wallet right away, or you're just showing the user some public stats anyways, and then it's like, cool, we're building a mood frame for you where we analyze your character. And hey, it's really cool if, even though I'm faking that I'm that user, I just see their character because whatever, right? It's non-public data. If you track the user in your user model and you use something like an external auth provider, like a dynamic, privy, third web, sign in with Neynar, something like that, then if you do that, please, and I urge you to do this because we had multiple 3-month refactors at clients of ours just because of this one data model, is if you have an external ID, just literally in your user model, as soon as you use an external auth provider, if you don't just use them for sign-in, but actually to manage your users as well, please don't. Just put up a database on your own. Just track the ID you get from that external auth provider as an additional ID in your user ID field. Why you want to do this is because then you can actually switch around the auth provider. If you want to change the sign-in method, you're not locked in, you can actually do this, because otherwise you just literally have to redo your whole authentication stack, and it's not pretty. I can tell you that. And then you can also store any other user data you want in that data schema. That's a lot on auth. I'm not sure if there's any questions. There's a lot of different things that play into auth: security, data model, sign-in methods, login methods, how to think about that. Sometimes you may want an email, sometimes just sign in with Farcaster works, right? So yeah. Dylan says, next auth works with SDK context data. You're losing the context of that user actually being the user. So you could use the sign-in method of the SDK, and then with next auth at the backend verify it and then sign in, because Frames v2 do not give you signed data directly. But yes, next auth, if you in Next.js, is probably a nice lightweight tool or a better auth. Yep. Any other auth questions? I know auth is probably the deepest we get. No. Okay, sounds good. If there's anything to add, otherwise let me know. On frame caching, this was the question we had before on how can we actually change the manifest? How can we change the icons, the splash image? Well, there's Tony's guidance on it, on how like Webcast does their caching. Generally though, frames are web apps, so your web caching headers help on the image and on the web page, and on the manifest URL in that case, like farcaster.json on that one. Using different images URL will also prevent caching, right? Like if you always have a dynamic image URL, that obviously can't be cached, right? There's just a little workaround. Literally, I'll just read out the guiding from Tony, but for the manifest itself, it's indefinitely cached by Webcast servers. So will be refreshed on next read. The way you would bust this is you go into the developer domains and you just check domain status. So it's basically what Sheldon typed in the chat before, where you just go into the tools again and you just re-verify your domain, and then you just have Webcast refetch it because they need to check it again, right, on next read. On the frame page, if the user just goes in and it doesn't have any kind of cache control headers, we're back to web tooling here, well, then this is also potentially cached. If you launch it from the developer frames, then this will also clear the cache. So literally using the dev tools to just test your frames with the production domain actually usually clears your cache, which is quite funny. The frame embed metadata, so like the little preview you see, which is like your preview image, that also is cached indefinitely. But you can also bust this by going to developers frames, frame embed, and resubmitting the URL, basically like checking it again and verifying it again, right? So any kind of input where there's the frame embed or you're locally testing and then you just use the production domain in the Webcast frames debugger, that will usually bust your cache. So just do all of that and then try again, right? The frame image itself, Webcast and your browser follow the cache control header on that image. So literally Googling and figuring around the cache control headers of where and how you serve your images will help. Otherwise, the hack is just use a different URL. You can use query parameters, like if you don't know what that is, like at the end, just question mark and then some random string. That will just not affect the image actually loading, but you now get a random string there so that you could work around caching. I would just use the cache headers if you can. Otherwise, that workaround usually works well. Rish, I know that you're also indexing frames for the frame, like literal full-on app library that you have. So if you want to talk on how your caching works and generally what you've observed.
Our cache is much more limited. I think it's like an hour or something. So whenever it's older than that, it'll just refresh it live and try to get the real manifest. So as long as you bust the manifest on warp cache on Warpcast, you should be fine. Perfect.
Cool. Yep. Is there any question on how to refresh that, how to go into caching, how to find the tools? Literally just go into your mobile phone settings, developers. If you don't have developers enabled, you go to advanced and then you click the little developer toggle. And you have that on desktop. Rish showed it. It's like webcast.com/tilde/developers and where to go. It's also in the slides. I think that's it on caching otherwise. A lot of people also then ask, like, oh, now I know the FID, but I want to show something more than the profile picture or the username. Those you get from the Farcaster Frame SDK. They're built right in. So how do you then get the user data? Well, Neynar has an endpoint by FID, so you can just use the FID. Remember before, FID is your unique identifier. use the FID for as much as you can, and then you can get full data for the user to look that up. You could also use hubs, which is like the actual Farcaster protocol under the hood, the decentralized network that you can call, and you can run your own, you can get your own data, or one API call via Neynar. Most devs I know generally use Neynar. Rish, if you have anything to add on how to get the data, I know you have an SDK, you have a lot of APIs.
Yeah, SDK API, anything should work. Our docs page, which is a screenshot I have here, it will literally give you the code on the right. You can try it on the docs page if you want. So you can just copy paste that code in your code base. If you're working with an LLM, just point them to the right docs page. Sometimes it hallucinates, but otherwise the LLM should be able to write this for you as well.
There's a little tip from me, and don't tell Rish I said this. If you just want to look up a user real quickly, like their connected wallets or their data, you can go to the Neynar reference, like by FIDs, type in their FID, just press try it, and because Neynar's docs will just, hey, it's a free API key that you don't need to worry about, you don't have to write any code, you just get the response data there. If you want to look up multiple FIDs, I also heard that works great. You can then copy out the response into an LLM, and it can give you all the data you want. So you can just like literally copy that data out, you get a JSON, it's really cool, it's somewhat structured data, you can put that in an LLM, do data analysis on it, have the JSON formatted into CSV, put it in an Excel. You can do a lot of things with Neynar's developer playground. Rish, you haven't heard this, people that just sign up for Neynar, build out your own tooling, pay for the API. But I've heard some people speaking on this call have used that a bunch for looking up user data.
It's great. We have had this for a while for those who could find it. Now we have a free tier for what it's worth. So you don't actually have to go through all the paid. You can go to neynar.com and there's just a free tier you can sign up for. But yeah, previously, or even now you can do this, but now this is, you can still do this, but now it's more painful than just getting the free tier, which is easier.
Yeah, it depends on what you do.
Yeah.
I actually use bot queries when people is like, hey, what's this person's like connected wallet? I'm just like, go to the profile, I look up the FID, and because
so the free thing that Samuel is talking about has a rate limit of 6 queries per minute, and so if you deploy it in production, then you're limited to 6 users per minute. But our paid versions are obviously not limited there.
Yeah. Also, like one of the biggest reasons to get the paid versions to me are the multiple apps, especially for like a business like us. We have multiple teams working on different kind of applications and frames. We have different environments like development and production, and I do not want our customers' API key to have to rotate and generally go through and just have to debug a bunch of shit. I just want the production API key to be separate from whatever else. So just having the ability to set up multiple apps, to me at least, is worth paying for. Yeah, I don't get Rish mad with that one, I guess.
For what it's worth, if you can use us for free, you should use us for free. It's not blocked off for a reason. So if you can get around it, great. That's our problem, not your problem. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I guess like one thing, because we also have Dylan on the call too. Dylan, is there anything else you want to add here? I'm putting you on the spot, but just in case.
No, I think this has been great. I guess I'll just very quickly call out Mini Kit, which the on-chain kit team built, which gives you some really cool tools to scaffold some of the stuff we're talking about here in terms of just generating your frame. You get some stuff, from on-chain kit. But otherwise, I'm happy to help in terms of if you have any other questions, and appreciate everyone leading this. This has been really great to just go through and hear all these guys talk about. Yeah, thank you so much.
I love on the spot. Thank you. Okay, how do you grow your frame usage? So just similar to any product building, you want to make sure that you are talking to your users and iterating really quickly. As I mentioned earlier, people are super responsive on Farcaster, so feel free to DM people, ask them to test and try out your product. People post bounties for that as well, if you want to be like $5 for the best product feedback. So there's all kinds of ways you can just like bootstrap your first early testers and start iterating. You can DM me also anytime. I'm at Linda and I can help test and share your frame. But yeah, you really want to think about the experience that will make your user share your frame. I don't, Rish or Samuel, did you want to add specifically to that point? Okay, cool. And then we also have on Warpcast, we recently added a trending frames ranking. So this will help users discover frames that are trending. We also have developer rewards. All of it is based on an algo that's a mix of on-chain transactions and frame opens. Over time, we're going to be weighting more and more towards on-chain transactions. We feel like that's one part that's just really unique about Farcaster is that you have the mini apps within the feed plus Warpcast wallet integration for seamless mobile transactions. So we really want to help support that experience, help users discover that magical moment in mini apps. So those, if you're able to, have on-chain transactions, frame opens will also help you with discovery. We also do featured frames. That's a recent thing on the Explore page. So if you have some big launch coming up, you can also ping me about potentially featuring a frame. We do want it to be pretty polished by that point, though, since we are helping to guide more and more users to it. So would ask maybe when it's closer to launch or polished that you can reach out to me about that. The share button is crucial. Like I feel like there's been so many missed moments where it's a really cool frame and I have to screenshot something in order to share that frame. So please just add a share button and find a way that you can make that a social experience for people, or at least a way of passing that on to others in their social feed. I think that is just like crucial. A mint button has also been really valuable for a lot of users on monetizing their frame. There's even like people want to mint their position on the leaderboard, something very basic like that, or mint their status that they have on a wait list or something. So there's all kinds of ways you can introduce mint functionality as well. And that just helps make it more engaging. One thing to really lean into also is just social features. That's what makes Farcaster so unique. You have all of these FIDs that you can then display within your app. So leaderboards work really well here. It's fun on Farcaster on the frame, seeing how off people were on the leaderboard or how well they did. So it's just like a very social interaction. And I also mentioned earlier, sending notifications to engage users, making sure that are retaining them. I think that if you can get users to install your app, that is like a really good pipeline into being able to continue to interact with them. And then ideally something that a user can take a daily action on. So, oh yeah, maybe thank you. A daily action on it. And so a lot of these games, like let's say you have a new game you can play or every day. So it's like I'm playing the equivalent of Wordle, which is Framedle. And it's really fun because I can then every single day have a new game. If your frame's not set up like that, you can even add things like building a streak. Like, for example, eggs, which is the most popular frame right now. We actually also did an eggs airdrop today. They actually have streaks of like how often you're claiming your eggs. And so like I'm going back in and making sure I'm claiming my eggs each day. So think about that kind of stuff. DM me anytime and I'm happy to help brainstorm. Anything else you guys want to add to that? Oh yeah.
There's a question actually in the chat of like for new users, how can a new user get usage in their frame? One thing that I really like to do is literally search for keywords. Like if your frame is say something in DeFi, you literally search the problem people have, or you find channels, different kind of people that usually talk about that, and then in the replies you're like, hey, here's this really cool tool, likely helpful to you, that just lets you do that, and then you just share your frame over and over, and because you have that share button in there, that user that probably has more followers than you now shares it, talks good about it, people add it, because you just, the general flow I think about is adding the frame first, and then sharing. If you want to check the context object also has the like sharing, and if there's like a notification subscription object already, you know that the user has added it. It's a little technical. If you want to DM me afterwards, happy to help there. But literally just having the user add the frame, then share it. That's how you get reach, by just literally posting it in communities that you like, replying to people and getting the word out there. It's a social media app in the end, right? Like, so you just have to figure out distribution any way you can.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing actually for bootstrapping Bountycaster. I just searched every single person that said the word bounty or a variation of I will pay for something, and then shared Bountycaster with them and said like, hey, would you be willing to test this out and like help us out? So yeah, just feel free to reach out to people. People are like, compared to Twitter, like or X, like people are so much more friendly and open to testing if not, you can just type it in DMs. Anything, Rish, did you want to add anything else? Otherwise, we can just have more open Q&A.
Yeah, I think open Q&A is fine.
Cool. Yeah, this is, well, if there's a topic we didn't already cover here, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or post in the chat. Perfect. Yeah, Alderstress, you want to?
Yeah, so I was wondering, one thing we could touch on a bit more is, because I've had a few ideas for frames where it's like multiplayer, and I'm just wondering, like, with building that as a web app, how to connect like the social graph of Farcaster to kind of like enable that multiplayer. I already know we covered a little bit of it in the slides here. It's just, as someone who's not super experienced with building stuff like this, I was wondering if like you can just kind of touch on kind of like a, I don't know how to explain this specifically, but just like kind of like the steps you go to like build or like include that data in the frame where people can play multiplayer.
Yeah, happy to touch on this a little bit. So like Samuel was saying before, building frames in many ways is just like building a web app. So if you go to docs.neynar.com, there's an easy way to start integrating social data where we have some docs on it. You can read through the docs. There's a section that like tells you how to fetch profiles and then exactly how to fetch the social graph. And there's essentially APIs that do this exact thing where you can fetch the followers and following of any given FID. You can just copy the code from here, tell an LLM to write it, et cetera, et cetera. You can also test, like Samuel was saying, in the page itself. And then you can go and put it in your app. There's other ways to get it from the hub, but this is probably the easiest way.
On the integration with the mobile multiplayer, like the multiplayer in the web app, one thing to consider here is actually authentication, because now you actually want to have the people sign in, so you would want to prompt them to just press a little message to sign in if they're not already. Because if I'm playing as Dan or Linda or somebody else, you're like, oh shit, that's not Linda, or I won against Linda, but you actually didn't. It's a little weird. So you probably want to do that in multiplayer unless it's anonymous. Otherwise, you can use the SDK context to get the FID, and then as Rish has just shown, just get the Farcaster data and then show that in your app. And then it's just like building any kind of other multiplayer where if you then want to have people send out, hey, I'm like in this lobby waiting for a game, well, then you would have them cast it, right? Or you can use intents to push people to direct message somebody else, right? That's how that would work. If you want to look that up, docs.farcaster.xyz has webcast APIs where you can see the cast intent, and there's a webcast section. Any examples of an existing frame that generates cast programmatically? If you're talking about cast programmatically not being user presses a button, it opens up the cast modal, and then they confirm, you would need a signer for that, which Rish probably you can just show the Neynar doc on.
Sure, yeah.
Because the way that I've seen people do it.
So there's a few. I think there's a difference between like popping users to write a cast, which if you're inside Warpcast or another Farcaster client, just show the compose box, and that's the easiest way, and don't worry about getting a signer. But if you want them to send out casts while they're in the frame without popping anything else, then you want what is called a signer, which is essentially an authorization permission that's recorded on Optimism blockchain, and gives the signer or gives your app access to write on the user's behalf. There's a few different ways to get a signer. You can again find this on our docs. Just there's a section called Write to Farcaster. It walks through the different kinds of signers you have. Most people in the frame situation, you want this one. Neynar sponsored signers also works with wallets like Privy. And you can then just jump to like how to write using these kind of signers. You can also just like copy paste the code or like just application the permission it needs to write on behalf of the user. And then you can just make an API call. Also, again, all of this is listed in this doc, but just to show you the API, there's a host cast API, and you'll just make this API call with the signer UUID that you get back and what you want to write. And then you make the call and the cast goes out to the protocol.
Okay, but a lot of it could be done mostly through Neynar, is what you're saying.
Yeah, all of this can be done through an area. You can also do it directly
Cool.
from the hubs. It's just a lot more work.
Cool.
Any other questions? Otherwise, one thing I also wanted to share was if you're looking for ideas on things to build, the someone build channel is really great because people just share tons of ideas. And what's really cool is that if you do end up building it, that could be your first user of the person who suggested it, and they are very incentivized to share it because they wanted to see it built. And so that's a great source of ideas as well. And then I'll share a link to Twitter's not loading for me right now, but I aggregated like a month ago just what were the ideas on that list. Twitter down? No. Okay. Any other questions before we hop off?
I think Twitter is down. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was like, it's just not working for me. Perfect opportunity for us. So we might see some numbers going up right now. All 37 users. Okay. Do you guys have any last remarks before we head out?
No, this was great. Thank you everybody for attending.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone needs help, feel free to ping any of us. If you need APIs, Rish is your guy to go to. Any questions about Farcaster and the dev ecosystem, go to Linda. If you just don't care at all and just want somebody to do it for you, we're happy to do that at dTech, and then we work with Rish and Linda both to get it done for you. So yeah, that's how the three of us usually interact. So enjoy that.
Yeah, thanks so much for attending, and maybe we can do more of these if people found it helpful. Feel free to DM me any feedback, and we can always improve if we do a future session. But we're going to have a lot of new changes to frames coming up very soon. The team's been working hard on it over the past couple of weeks, so stay tuned for some announcements as well.
Also, if you have any questions that you would love to see in future workshops, just please DM any of us or publicly post it so we know what kind of topics to go over.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much. And then hopefully someone recorded it. That would be awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye.